Welcome, John. Firstly, thanks for your patience. It's taken me in particular a wee while longer than we would have wanted to service the request. Today's remit, to use our time to explore the club's aspirations, challenges, shortcomings and successes. Let's start at the most important place. How are you? Where's the energy levels at?
Energy levels are okay. It's probably as well that we didn't meet earlier because it was a bit of a shock when I got back involved, but we're now on a stable footing and we understand better what we need to do to fix. So I'm quite comfortable that we're in a better place than we would have been if we'd done it a month ago.
And so much has happened across such a short space of time. We'll touch on all these points. We'll look at the board, we'll look at the surface, we'll look at the ending of the season, we'll look at cup success and where we're finished. We now move into squad building, all of which we'll come across. So maybe timing is actually fortuitous, but I appreciate your patience. We've got a new manager in place, squad being built. I know that you've respected Dougie for a long time. I know you've known him for a long time. What's the discussions like?
I think Dougie's direct and is easy to deal with. I had stepped back a bit from Raith Rovers and I got more involved with my local team, Symington Tinto, which their field backs onto our garden. And the manager at Symington Tinto is Dougie Imrie, Senior. So there's a bit of a connection there. But I'd seen what Dougie had done at Morton. I know a fair number of the previous Morton directors. I know the CEO who was CEO at the time when Dougie arrived, and they all said very good things about him. So when the vacancy came up, I was very keen that the board should talk to him, and they did. And hopefully they made the right decision.
He's as driven a person as I know, as I've met, as I get to spend time with. From our shared experience, I would think that's something that you would view as a positive.
Absolutely. I mean, at the Christmas lunch, I got a laugh from some quarters because I likened him to young John McGlynn.
So focused.
So focused and so willing to do anything to move the thing forward. Fortunately, he hasn't had to repaint the dressing rooms or fix the plumbing, but he's done everything that's been asked of him and more.
Dougie speaks about putting together a winning team, but also a culture of expectation from all of us, to be fair. Has his level of demand impressed, surprised, amused, or even challenged you at parts?
Not really, because we don't talk every day, but when we do talk, we talk along the same lines. And I'm also very comfortable with the pairing of Dougie and Andy.
It's such a huge role, isn't it? And especially when you've got a manager who wants to control all aspects of what's going on in his squad building, his recruitment, his negotiation. Andy is a hugely important person. What about where we find ourselves right now? It's a tricky time for everyone, most importantly the players themselves. We see players that we care for move on, but there's also the energy and the excitement of a rebuild. A significant rebuild for Raith Rovers this season. What's that like for you at board level? How does that play out?
Well, personally, I've never really felt that the board should interfere in selection of players. That's down to the manager. Our job is to work out with them what the budget can afford and to support them as required. Sometimes the manager will get you involved in player discussions. John McGlynn did on a couple of occasions get me involved, which I quite enjoyed. But Dougie has got great contacts. So at the moment, he's got the structure that he wanted, and now it's just a question of waiting to see who he decides to tie down, particularly in the midfield.
Indeed. We're going to take a little bit of a sidestep. We'll come back to all of these themes, but the most prominent thing in Raith Rovers' life just now is infrastructure. We've got the renewal of our pitch. Tell us about the cost, the funding, the rationale for a renewal rather than an upgrade or an adaptation to grass.
Okay. We shouldn't have to renew the pitch this year. When we put it in 7-8 years ago, we used a guy called Bill Gillespie, He's top guy in Scotland. He's done Murrayfield, he's done Scotstoun, he's done Kilmarnock. He knows it all. And he guided us through the initial phase with David Sinton, and we put in place a regime whereby we looked after the pitch on a daily basis, but quarterly we brought in an expert company to rejuvenate it. Unfortunately, one of the things that happened when I stepped back 3 years ago was to save money, they stopped bringing the specialist company in. Now, what that meant was, as it's been explained to me by Bill and others, is the blades started sitting down. They were never properly brought back up. And that's why it looks visually bad. Now, when we put it in, we put in a super shock absorber base. And at that time, we hoped to use it for 7 years, but we knew we could probably use it for 10. We could still get another at least years out of it. But the players feel that it needs replaced. And some of the players were quite vociferous to me about it. My response was quite simple, but we only ever win at home. We should keep the pitch because it's obvious that we're more used to it than anybody else. Either way, we decided to go ahead. We had a board meeting and I was outvoted on it, that the directors decided that we should replace the pitch. But we had this dilemma. We needed a new pitch. So where were we going to get the money? Well, what the board have agreed is that we will repay the loan that we're getting from future revenues on the pitch. So we've managed to get a loan to cover the pitch replacement, and we will pay that back probably about, it may take us 4 or 5 years to pay it back, but that's the current plan.
Any grant funding?
No.
There was maybe an expectation across supporters that there would be such facilities available, but that we find ourselves in this kind of unusual position of we aspire to be in a Premier League that we've not been in for 30 years, so that may have hampered funding because it may have to come back up, but equally we've not been there for 30 years. Was that something that had any legs, or was there just not the opportunity?
I don't know the detail because a lot of what happened with Falkirk and other clubs happened when I was focused on things elsewhere. My understanding is that the SFA will not give funding to any club that's in danger of getting promoted. So if we want a grant, we can go back to the Seaside League and it may well be easier. At the same time, there's no reason why we should be looking for a grant because we're a commercial operation. And we can rent the pitch out and we can generate the revenue. To give you an example of the alternative, I was talking to one of the directors of another championship club who have got a grass pitch, and they're spending £80,000 a year on renting facilities for players' training. So moving to grass is not like the old days where we had Andy Lee and a pitchfork and we threw some grass seed down in the summer. So from a commercial perspective, it makes sense to use plastic. Now, the person who's advancing the money has got no interest in helping the football club, but is very keen to help the community foundation because her satisfaction is from watching the children play on it and the walking football. And that's the thing that we would lose if we went to grass, or one of the things we'd lose.
What do you say to the sceptics in terms of the surface who put forward arguments such as, but it saves you money, as you've said? I'm not sure why that's a bad thing. It's not traditional or the classic. It doesn't look good on my telly. How do you balance those arguments against the limitations that's placed upon us and the fact that your aspiration has always been from the day we've met of Starts Park needs to be vibrant as often as possible and every day of the year, if possible. And we've got literally thousands of the next generation of players out there, the former generation, and really we've got kids from 2 to mid-80s taking care of their health and their well-being. What do you say to these people?
We can't please everybody. If we did get promoted to the Premier League, we'll have to wait and see whether it's still a requirement that we move away from plastic to grass and run the risk of having postponements like St Johnstone have had, like Dundee have had, playing in a mud bath. And I'm very conscious of the fact that the reason that we have such a difficult stadium to maintain is because of the 10,000 seater rule. And if only we hadn't been quick enough to build the North Stand and the South Stand, we'd be in a far better position from a maintenance perspective today. If you do go to the Premier League, the finances change dramatically. And therefore, it should be possible to, again, fund a pitch. But to put down grass would be £1 million, not £300,000.
Yeah. Community engagement will be maximised. What more can be achieved in terms of the structure that we've got? And I guess the logical big step now is, when do we see a senior women's team wearing Raith Rovers colours?
Okay, let's start with the stadium. One of the discussions I had with the incoming board 3 years ago was we had plans to refurbish all parts of the stadium. The dressing room area plans were essentially put together by John McGlynn. But we were looking at it from the perspective of how can we use the ground 365 days a year. So the first step in that stage was when we put in the Titan, or the captain's cabin, captain's lounge. The idea was that that could be a warm space in the winter, or a cafe, keeping the grandparents out of the North Stand when they were watching the children. But there were plans for the development of what is the 1883 lounge, for the boardroom, and for other parts of it. Unfortunately, the focus in the last 3 years in the redevelopment has been on those 20 days a year. So to give you an example, we're sitting in what's called the boardroom, but to me it's a small hotel cocktail bar. Now, what we need to do to get people in is to get a proper events person and say, right, what should the layout of the boardroom be that would attract people, whether it's away days for management training, or whether it's something like Andy's Man Club, or Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics Anonymous is interesting because another director, another club, told me that their issue was they had to hide the bar. And this is what we've got to look at. It was the same with the 1883 lounge is not the design that was passed to the new board. And we're probably going to have to rework it so that it's easier for catering, but it's also multi-purpose. Because in discussing even yesterday with the people from the Community Foundation, they were talking that football should only be a small part of what the Community Foundation does for the community at large. And that's where we hope that they could use the rooms we've got, if you like, the 2711, which used to be the 200. Yeah. We've got the Raith Suite, which is now used by the Jim McMillan Club. We've got the old Jim McMillan Club. We've got here the boardroom. And we've got the captain's lounge, and then there's another lounge hidden away that McGregor solicitors have been using for a number of years. So our plan is to rebadge them and keep the Raith Suite, keep 2711, keep 1883. The old Jim McMillan Club, the working name for it is the Chairman's Retreat. And the McGregor Club, we're going to temporarily badge as the Manager's Hideout, because it's not that easy to find unless you know where it is. And what we're going to do is look at marketing it to the community. 3 years ago, thanks to Scott Boyd and Stephen McDonald, we had a very successful Microsoft Europe football tournament here. And we took a lot of revenue. That was before we had done this refurbishment. They brought teams from all over Europe, and they just loved it. And that's the type of thing we should be replicating. So with the new general manager, Davey, who's joined us recently, we're looking at bringing in a hospitality consultant who knows how we should be geared up to run events. And hopefully we will have a plan which unfortunately will involve some re-engineering of a number of the developments of the last year or so in the coming 6 months, with a view to being fully operational this time next year.
You link in there to the general manager role, operational rather than a footballing role, massively wide-ranging job remit. Is it that Davey's role, Davey Byrne, will be the kind of conduit for many other people coming in on a part-time basis, on a consultancy basis? Tell us a wee bit about that role, why it was essential.
One of the things that the focus of the last 3 years has been on promotion to the Premier League. And that's come at a cost of downsizing the back office at a time when the transactions going through the back office have actually increased about 50%. And Davey is an administrator. He's had a lot of experience with Belhaven. He's had experience with other football clubs. So he sort of knows what it looks like. And he's used to the financial cycles of football, because it's not like any other business. The money comes in at different times of the year. You can look at your bank account in June and it looks great because you get your season ticket money, because you get your sponsorship money, because in May you got the bulk of the payment for the previous season, and it's not a big deal. The problems come in November, in January, in February, and March, and that's what happened to us this year.
One of the threads that we didn't pick up in a wee bit of discussion was women's team. I know that there's discussions at a fairly advanced and senior level. Can you tell us anything about that, or is it a wee bit early yet?
No, it's interesting because we had a meeting yesterday, and we talk about a women's team, and at the moment, as I understand it, the Community Foundation essentially has got teams up to about 18 years. And the women's team would be the stage after that. We started talking about it when John Potter was brought on board. And that was one of the things that he was looking at. There was a concern over cost. So it was parked a little bit to the side. But I'm certainly confident that it's possible to get sponsorship and to deal with the cost side of it. The discussion we had yesterday was, I said, you talk about women, but you're only talking about going up to about 21 or 22. What about a ladies over 35's team? And we should be looking at replicating what we've got on the men's side. So we are at a fairly advanced stage. I would like to do it quicker, but I'm told that it takes time. It's a question of finding players, finding coaches, finding places to play. So we had a very good meeting yesterday. The people who are running with it because at the moment we've got a small board, we've got a rescue situation. Alan and Rory are putting in a tremendous number of hours, as is Stephen, and we just don't have the bandwidth to deal with it. So they're looking at putting a group together to drive it forward. And other things being equal, hopefully they will start playing competitively 27, 28. But in the interim, we may be able to get, or they may be able to get enough people together to start playing friendlies. But as I understand it, the aim is to get into, is it the 5th tier, which is a geographic league. And then if you can get out to that tier, you go into, is it League One or something, the equivalent of League One, and then they've got 2 equivalent of Premiership or whatever. This is where Davy brings a lot of valuable experience, because Montrose ladies team does very well, and he spent time at Montrose. So yesterday he was able to tell us a bit of the experiences of Montrose.
It's really encouraging. You mentioned the board there. You mentioned almost having restricted bandwidth because the number that currently exists. I was thinking on the way down, and I couldn't help but think of the kind of film quote with regards yourself of, just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. So I'm maybe in a parallel world thinking of your role as John Sim here. Coming back in, it's not something that you may have wanted to do over many years. Your connection with the club is always strong, but it's with a different focus. What's it like being back in the board, interim chairman, and what's the immediate drive for yourself?
Okay, well, the board, or certain members of the board, have been asking me to rejoin for a while. And I said, there's no point because you don't listen to me. But then we had the general manager and director leave in January. We had the chairman leave February, March. We were down to essentially 2 directors. They both asked me if I'd be willing to rejoin. I said, certainly. I came in and I was a bit shocked by what I found. But we are stabilizing. I can't say enough good things about Rory stepping up to the plate, because without that, we would have probably gone into administration in February. And Alan, they both got full-time jobs, but Alan's putting in a tremendous of additional time. In the past, he looked after the football side of things, but he's been trying to help out on the admin side of things and just try and find out exactly where we're at. We went through a phase of every time we opened a cupboard, another skeleton fell out. So we've got a number of clean-up operations going on. Rory has been able to find us a very interesting consultant who, to give an example, stepped in at the last moment to help us deal with the VAT. She was able to make sure that we filed by the deadline, and we only called her in on the last day. And she's identified areas where there are more savings to make. So that's what we need to support the general manager with, is to bring in people who can help fix the current problem and help him develop a system so that going forward, we're not going to run into the same issues.
And what about the board makeup? Are you looking to expand? Are you looking to recruit? Is there discussions ongoing? Are there interested parties? What does that look like? Because it's a board that's lost really key figures. I'm thinking kind of Dean and Colin and his CEO as well in fairly short time. Others who have made really important contributions. But is it a case that the small number so heavily connected to the club is where you're going to reside for now, or is that going to expand?
That's a good question, to which I don't have a complete answer. I can give you my opinion. And my opinion is that for the foreseeable future, we probably need to run lean and mean. We're in talks with a couple of people about indicated an interest. But it's difficult to bring people on board, sorry for the pun, but bring them into a board situation where you're verging on the edge of trading while insolvent. Now, we're not worried about that because, as I say, Rory has stepped up to the plate. He, through two of his companies, put in funds to enable us to meet payroll for February. And Starks Park Properties put funds in to enable us to meet payroll for March and April. May we will make, because cash flow is so uncertain in football, because you don't know who you're going to draw in the cup. Are you going to get knocked out? Where are you going to be in the league? That we look at it on a 3-month rolling plan with a 12-month behind it. And we're comfortable that we can manage the next 3 months, and we will manage the next 12 months. It'll be considerably easier if we draw Celtic away again. But if we don't, and it's Livingston, so be it, we can manage it. But the plug number is always the manager's budget.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, rightly questions will be asked. Are we kind of covering ourselves in that capacity?
I'm pretty sure, having seen the waste that's taken place over the last 2 or 3 years, that it's possible to right size without cutting the manager's budget. And again, I take my hat off to Alan and Rory because I said to them, look, it's going to be very difficult to cut the manager's budget for a couple of reasons. One is the league is very competitive. But the other one is that he's got a fair number of players signed up for this coming season that he didn't recruit that are on very generous packages. So the recommendation that, or the consensus the board reached was that we had to make sure his budget was pretty much the same as last year. In fact, it's a little bit more, but in reality it's a little bit less because last year we didn't have the full increase in NHI for the 12 months. But basically he's got about the same budget for this year as we had last year.
I'm going to pick up just some individual terms because for non-finance people, for football supporters is what we are, administration, insolvency, lean and mean, these are things that have us stepping back and we kind of a sharp intake of breath. But for those of you in the footballing finance world and the much wider finance experience that you've got, you always tend to follow that up when you see people saying, it's all right, it's all right. Is that still where you're sat?
Yes, as long as, this is why I wouldn't go back on the board before because they were just ignoring me. Now, Rory and Alan and Stephen were building a consensus. We need to get to sustainability and we need to operate as a championship club as long as we're in the championship. Not go to having a Premier League club's overhead. So you could see some of the changes that took place in terms of, okay, technical director is nice, but it's a luxury that we can't afford at this point in time. We're going through that on a zero-based budgeting approach. I mean, give you an example of the discussion. Sky TV has gone up dramatically in cost since I was last involved. And now Sky TV doesn't have exclusivity. So we've got a Sky TV subscription and we've got a TNT subscription. Okay, they've got to go. It may be that over time we get them back. But for the moment, we've got to stabilize the ship and we just got to do without it because in reality, we only use the facilities 20 days a year for 2 hours. And most of the time people are talking about the game or complaining about the referee or drinking their beer and the television is just in the background.
What do you think is our particular vulnerability right now?
Our vulnerability, okay. If anyone's got time in their hands, I would encourage them to look at YouTube, and there is a podcast called Business of Sport. And they've interviewed a significant number of CEOs in English non-league clubs and English League One and League Two, which I call Division 3 and Division 4. And they also talk a lot about Michael Eisner. Michael Eisner was the CEO of Disney. He's now effectively the owner of Portsmouth. He's a shrewd businessman. And he's basically saying that it's unsustainable what's going on in the English leagues at the moment. But if you look into some of these stories, and the closest I can relate to in Scotland is what's happening at Dunfermline, where an American investor is coming in and is quite happy to lose $1.5 million, $2 million a year. Because what they're doing is they're looking at it as an alternative asset. And they think that the value can go up. And certainly if Dunfermline got through last night and had gone on to beat St Mirren, the value of Dunfermline would have gone up, and he would have got more than his 1.6 million or whatever it is he's invested in if he wanted to flip it and sell it on. Now, that was what the Silver Bear people at Silver Bear were essentially talking about, 3.5 years ago. And that's something that we're hoping to explore with the main fan base. And 1883 is a good indicator. Season ticket holders are a good indicator. Pie and Bovrils, amazingly entertaining, but it's about 15 people. So where do we want to go? In 2005, as I understand it, the message I got was we want local ownership, we want stability, and we want to be part of the community. Is that still what we want? Do we want local ownership? Are we ready for a strategic investor, or are we ready for somebody who wants to take over the whole shebang, put a whole bunch of money in and see if we can make a profit? And you asked me about the risk. I'm wedded to the community club, and yes, we can look at all sorts of options. Never say never. But what happens if more and more of these American investors come in? Because Dumbarton have got a Canadian investor. Kelty, I think, have got American investors. What happens if the Seaside League all gets bought up? And everyone's losing 1.5, 2 million a year. And okay, does that mean we go into the third level of Scottish football? And this is the type of conversation we've got to have. If you listen to the people, the accounting type people in England, they say it's unsustainable. But how long is it going to go on for? And if you look at Scotland, you've got Rangers and Celtic. Rangers have got these San Francisco people involved. Celtic are Celtic. Aberdeen's American. I think Hibs is American. Hearts, they've got this significant interest from Brighton. St Johnstone are American. Dunfermline are American. You can definitely see a trend.
What would workable investment look like for you? Because you lay out really neatly the many faces of what that would look like, and short of having the crystal ball, you've got a ball behind you, but it's not a crystal one in the sense that we need. The risk and reward of each option. What would workable and positive look like for you?
Okay. That's a difficult question, because are we talking about me, John Sim? Are we talking about the supporters in the South Stand? Or are we talking about the people who live in Kirkcaldy? And you'll get a different answer to each question.
What about John Sim?
Well, you should talk to Petra. In the sense that when I got into this, I was 55, I was single, I didn't have a care in the world, and it wasn't a big deal. Then, fast forward 20 years, I'm married, I've got an accounting firm in Thailand, and suddenly the ball game's changed. Just when you think you're winning the rat race, along come faster rats. So what I think needs done is, everyone says the structure stops investment. That is easily fixable. And that is something that I had been working on for the last 2 or 3 years, as I'd agreed with the board that came in 3 years ago. We're getting close. It's been put a little bit to the side because I've now had to focus back on the club. But basically, this is what is going to be put forward sometime in 2026. We have, for historical reasons, got a dog's dinner of a structure. Hopefully, by this time next year, we might just have Stark Spark Properties and Raith Rovers. And then it's far easier to explain to an incoming investor. Now, at the same time, we need to tidy up the balance sheet of Raith Rovers, because we've got historic debt, so former directors going back in time. Unfortunately, Turnbull's no longer with us. Unfortunately, Bill Clark's no longer with us. We've got to deal with those situations, and we will work our way through it. But if I was an investor coming in, I'd say, right, I need to get rid of the debt in Raith Rovers. Okay, this is where we go back to what we discussed earlier, was if we'd gone into administration, we could have dealt with all of that. But we're not going into administration, that's fine. So if I was advising an investor coming in, I'd say, right, that debt has got to be converted into equity. So we've got all these shares in Raith Rovers. So if I'm coming in as a Brighton, I want 30%, I want 30% of the enlarged share. And I want, if someone was coming in and it wasn't part of a multi-club setup, my understanding is they could own 100% if they wanted to. And it could well be that what would probably happen is the guy would say, I want 51% or I want whatever percent, and we can make a deal this way. But we really need to clean things up a little bit. If you again listen to Business of Sport and how much people are paying for football clubs, it can be between 1.5 and about 5 times annual revenues. So Raith Rovers could be between 4.5 and 15 million pounds. That's a big gap. There are people contact us all the time. At the moment, I'm aware of 5 different interested parties who want to buy Raith Rovers. Now, I've been through this for years, and people will say, well, we want to see your numbers. I say, no, you need to come and see our stadium. You need to come and see our fans. You need to come and see our setup. And we need to see who you are. So the information we're going out to these people are hopefully helpful, but what we say is, what's the stadium worth? No idea. What we can tell you is the insurance company say it's going to cost £12 million to rebuild, so that's the insured value. What's the land worth? Who knows? What I can tell you is the last time the board had it valued, and that would be before 2005, was £2 million. But I've seen many valuations on the land, and it depends on what's happening with housing and other bits and pieces. And I can tell you, and you can go to Companies House and check that our turnover is between, £2.5 and £3 million, depending on where we finish in the league, and depending who else is in the league. And we'll just have to see what happens. But regardless, we'll tidy up the structure, and we'll listen to anyone who wants to talk to us, but we're not going to be diverted from fixing the sustainability of the club. And we're not going to be diverted from moving forward on things like the ladies' team or on helping the Community Foundation expand. Now, the Community Foundation is also interesting because the board of the Community Foundation, as I understand it, having talked to, in the past, chairman, vice chairman, treasurer, they're pretty risk averse. So they don't want to overcommit. If you look at something like, however, at the same time, they don't have enough field space, especially plastic pitch, in order to deal with the demand they've got. They're turning people away. So how do we deal with this? Well, we have something in the background which has been sitting there for, I guess, 7 or 8 years. I'll have to check, called the Stark Spark Foundation. And the Stark Spark Foundation has not done anything, but it's existed. And 4 or 5 years ago, we had discussions with the council about taking on additional space under community leasing or community transfer. So in Symington, we currently have a lease with South Lanarkshire Council, but we want to move forward to a total community transfer. And we're looking at the possibility of doing the same model in Kirkcaldy, on the Kirkcaldy area, because when we had discussions with the council, we looked at places in Kirkcaldy, in Glenrothes, in Aberdour, in Kinghorn, all over the place, in the wider area. And as I understand it, the Community Foundation is being restricted because of lack of space, especially artificial surface, and the cost to the parents is having to go up because the cost of renting artificial pitches is going up. Most of them in our area, I guess, are owned by the council, and the council's not exactly flush with cash.
I'm not really sure how to certainly summarise the most wide-ranging answer that I think you could have possibly offered. I guess coming back to the structure, Rovers fans who've got an eye in that world will know it's complex, it's intercompany, it's cross-generation, it's a riddle. From those of us outside the financial world, it gives us a starting point, but clearly there's a lot of work is still needed to streamline that. It sounds that you've got a timeline that's workable, that there's movement.
We've got a timeline that's workable, but the mistake everybody looks at is who owns the shares. The shares are worthless. Yeah. It's who holds the debt. You know, companies get into trouble because the banks call their line. It's not the shareholders who bounce up and down. So this is what any potential investor come in to look at. They won't look at who owns the shares or the trust document. They'll say, we don't want to repay that debt. Who's that debt to? We need to negotiate with them.
What does legacy planning look like for you?
Well, Graham Kilgara asked me that question on his radio show a number of years ago. I said, it's not an issue, Graham, I'm going to live till 120. And that's an answer you can give in your 60s, because you're still young. Once you pass 70, everything gets a lot tougher. And you maybe realize that 120 may be pushing your luck. You may not even want to live, if you could, to 120. And I've also got to take into account my wife's nightmare is that she ends up in charge of a football team. She'll enjoy coming to watch it, but she doesn't want to have to deal with it. So I think, as you're aware, I thought I need to get some people that she at least knows who she can talk to if there's a big party, because I left the scene. So again, it comes back to let's simplify the structure. Let's just see what happens in terms of who's coming into the Scottish leagues. And if we don't get a big investor, we're going to end up in League Two because everyone else in the country's got a big investor. Let's see what the fans want. Let's see if we can protect the community foundation, because if we do go to grass, where the hell are they going to play? And at the moment, they're short of space. So that's a piece of the jigsaw. And if the right person arrived and they said, okay, John, go sit on the beach in Thailand, drink your beer, enjoy your trips to Colorado and play in your garden in Symington, very happy to do it. The question is, who is the right person? And when will it happen? It could happen tomorrow. It could take a lot longer.
Where is the hope? What's the positivity? Because these are really unusual interviews, and I was speaking with the guys before it. As Raith Rovers supporters, we have a really unusual amount of access. We're trusted with RaithTV in particular, our media team. So we don't take these times lightly, but we do know that we get drawn to the dark corners in some of the discussion, because that's the bit that's not in the public line of sight. Where's the hope? Where's the positivity? What fires us up? What's next?
Well, Rory's Mr. Positivity. I'm Mr. Realistic. And we're both going to the same place. It's just that perhaps we have different routes to getting there. I've spent more time at the School of Hard Knocks perhaps than he has, but you need both parts of it. And I mean, again, for me, Rory's the future. And that's why when you ask me, can I walk away? Yes, I can walk away. Because do I enjoy coming to Starks Park the way I used to? No. Because it's changed. You know, I could not believe that they played that song at the end of the game. I mean, now, I spoke to the manager the next day. I said, Dougie, I'm very upset about that. I said, I think I'm going to have to apologise. He said, John, I've already apologised. It was totally out of line. Now, I understand how it happened. And I understand why Dougie was upset, and I know why I was upset. We both know Roy McGregor. Roy McGregor has done so many good things, not just for the fans of Ross County, but for the Dingwall area, for Invergordon, for the Highlands. And it's just generational. We've spoken about this before. Now, interestingly, we're getting a hard time from SPFL about it. Obviously, it was on television and people saw it, and they came back to us and said, no, you should not be doing this. This is not the way to conduct yourself as a football club.
How would you describe Raith Rovers, this entity that...
Raith Rovers is different. It's a community club. Dancing in the streets of Raith. Shipwrecked on the way to the Canary Islands. By the way, have you seen us beating Bayern Munich 1-0 in the... Because they don't believe this sort of thing. Yeah. Okay, I'll show you. Here's the picture. And there is a place for Raith Rovers in the wider global community. We just need to get it out there. In the same way as nobody in the world really had heard about Wrexham until a couple of supposed film stars who I'd never heard of come in and throw money at it.
I'm not sure we're going to have many film stars turning up. We have in the past, of course, very, very notable. What do you feel? Is there anything you feel we've not covered? Because I always want this to be about the person who's been interviewed, not about my agenda. Is there anything you arrived with today thinking, I don't think we've serviced a particular point very well?
Not really, but again, what we're going to do is to ask people for their specific questions. Yeah. And it's a balance. Everyone's entitled to opinions, but we shouldn't let the facts get in the way. We should try and make sure that people have a chance to understand the situation before they pontificate on it.
And I do wonder, there has been an open discussion, and Rory sat in that seat saying we need to be better at communication. We've got a good mechanism for doing that. We're looking at I think it's bi-monthly updates, regeneration of the club 1883. And I do wonder whether these kind of sessions should happen more often, because what happens, we meet once a season, once every 2 or 3 seasons, and there's so much to cover that you start getting drilled into one corner, and as I say, it tends to be the darkest corner that we'll be drawn to, because their club's security is the most prominent thing. So possibly we do need to come back. I would also think it's worth noting, and people will be getting emailed about this imminently, is that those kind of direct questions can come through the club TV, can come through myself, but we've got an opportunity to meet with Dougie, possibly not next week, but the week after, I think the week of the 25th. 27th, 28th. I spoke with him this morning, and he's really looking forward, and that's where the questions will come in. We'll manage them into a way that makes the session flow and will also entertain folks. But maybe we do need to do this a bit more often to get that wider spread, because the positivity can drop off.
We said that, 4 years ago when you interviewed me in Thailand from the office. And we just got it to make it happen.
That's fair.
Hopefully that's something that, again, I take your point about paywalls. Yes, we've got to fuss over the 1883 people, but there's a whole bunch of other people out there who quite simply may not be able to afford to give any more to the club. And this is what we've got to be careful of, is when do you push too hard?
I think it's a hugely important comment as we're coming towards the end, because it was certainly one of the real big driving factors for today, was from our perspective as people who have kind of worked with the club over many years, is I think questions coming in via Club 1883 for yourself would have been really interesting, but our driver is always, this needs to be a free to air, everyone needs to see this. Maybe there is an argument in terms of Club 1883 that it is a private shelf life, exclusive access, but then actually after a period of time, I'm only driven by supporters access, is that it goes out to the wider community, because we do have things that sit unseen.
You and I both know it goes out to the wider community by the pie and bovril within 12 hours. Yeah. So again, this is a discussion we're having at the board level. Great. Is how do we fuss over the 1883 people? And we've got a divergence of views. And surprise, surprise, it's generational. Because the people of my vintage are looking for something different, perhaps, than the younger people.
The way forward certainly seems to have a kind of dynamic nature to it. We start, and of course we'll pick up with Dougie in the next kind of 10 days or so, that on the playing front we're moving, on the community front we're moving. We've got a surface that's as high spec as it can be arriving, and I think it's the first time in weeks that I've not heard tractors out over my shoulder. You've got movement on the structures, the window's open for investment. Anything else that you would want to add in terms of summary?
Okay, let me tell you a story that happened at the Partick Thistle game 2 years ago at Stags Park. At the time, one of the directors said, we need to meet before the game. Let's meet at the Navarre Bar. So, okay, that's a private place. So he called the Navarre Bar to book a table. And they said, we don't do bookings. But it's Raith Rovers director, so we'll put a reserved sign on the table. So we arrived, and it was, as you can imagine, humming, because it was a big game that night. And we had a table, but we hadn't booked any chairs. So either way, eventually we sat down. And at one point, Rory asked me, he said, in all the years, how could you always be confident that we weren't going to go into receivership? I said, Rory, because I could control it.
Yep.
Now, Rory has really stepped up to the mark in the last few months when others deserted the supposedly sinking ship. And I'm very comfortable that he's around, because I know if anything happened to me tomorrow, the club would be in very good hands.
To come back to our famous shipwreck story, the ship ain't gone down with you at the helm, is it?
No, it's not. I mean, we may not win the European Cup, but the ship's not going down.
John, for now, let me thank you for your time. Our discussions, whether they be on camera or off camera, are always open in nature. They're always engaging. Thanks for your time. We will touch base, I'm sure of that.